let's talk about price elasticity of supply. The cool thing about this one is that it's the same thing as price elasticity of demand, but now we're just focusing on the supply curve. So basically what happened here is we had a change in demand, right? So maybe more income, price of substitute changes, something changed demand, and then that changes price on the supply curve. Same thing happened with the demand curve back here, where we saw this change from G to H. There was a change in supply, so that changed price, and then we have to look at what change in quantity was. But on this one, we're looking at a change in demand changed the price on the supply curve. And so the calculation is the same idea. You're still doing new minus old divided by old for both, but now because of the law of supply, which says price is up, quantity up, your answer is always a positive number. So now you don't have to worry about changing it. So now if you got a 0 point something calculation, less than 1, still inelastic. If you got greater than 1, that is elastic. And if you got equal to 1, that is unit. All right. So we can do another example here where we're going from A to B. So more income, change demand, that changes price from A to B. So now let's calculate this price elasticity here. So price elasticity of supply. We'll look at the quantity. So what is new? We're going A to B. So 14 is the new minus the old divided by the old. And then we'll do price new 600 on the price and 600 here. Remember, quantity always goes on top. Very important. Right? So if you did this in your calculator, just working top down, you would get 4 over 10 divided by 100 over 600, which is 0.4 over 0.167. And so if you did 0.4 divided by 0.167, you will get 2.4. Okay. So, or 2.395, and you can round that up to 2.4. So that is the principle behind the price elasticity of supply. Again, because price changes, quantity changes. So we're just looking at this from a supply side example. Right? New minus old divided by old, new minus old divided by old. Very important. Now let's talk about the polar cases of elasticity. So we talked about inelastic, unit, and elastic. But if we kept going to the far extremes on both sides, we do end up with something that is perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic. Now, perfectly elastic does have another name, and that is infinite elasticity. Because if you were to do the calculation, price elasticity of demand, you would end up with an infinity. All right? And the reason you end up with infinity is because the price doesn't change here. Your demand curve is horizontal. Your price stays the same. So your price doesn't change. And since your price doesn't change, you're going to be dividing by 0, and you can't do that, so we call this infinite elasticity. All right? So there is no change to the price here. Okay, you just buy an infinite quantity at this price. So whether it's the demand curve or supply curve, if it's a horizontal line, then you are perfectly elastic. Right? The other side of this is perfectly inelastic, and you might have guessed it, it is a vertical line. All right? So on this one, what is perfectly inelastic is we do have a change in price, but there is 0 change in quantity. That's why the another name for this is zero elasticity. Okay, so if you were to do the formula PED, you would end up with 0. If you got 0, that means it is perfectly inelastic. Some example of this are one-of-a-kind art pieces. Right? There's only a certain quantity, so because we only have that limited quantity, the only thing to change is price. And so on the demand curve or supply curve, it's a vertical line. So if we were to show you a supply curve, it would look like this. So like Another example of this would be something like medical goods or like insulin, where we have a certain quantity, and that amount of quantity we need. We are demanding this much quantity. All right. It does not matter what the price is. We need this. All right. So then we have our supply curve right here. Right. And then if supply changes, right, let's say a decrease in supply, we see a increase in price. But look, in terms of medical goods, right, the price changed, but the quantity did not change. That means it is perfectly inelastic, right? So you're probably wondering, like things like medical goods, why are those inelastic? Well, let's look at the things of what makes something elastic or inelastic, right? So if you have a higher availability of inputs or substitutes, you are more elastic. So let's go back to the medical goods example. Their insulin is very specific, right? There's not a lot of substitutes out there. And so since there's less substitutes, the people that have to have insulin are locked in to whoever they get it from. They can't just go to HEB and just get all this different variety, store brand, name brand, all that, right? They are locked into a certain small supply. Less substitutes, more inelastic. More substitutes, more elastic. And we can think about this like from a soda standpoint. You go down to HEB, there are so many substitutes for soda that if Coca-Cola were to raise prices, then you quickly switch to something else. And so Coca-Cola is going to have a high elasticity because there's more substitutes. Okay. Something else that would make you more elastic or more sensitive is a higher percent of your budget. So if you have to spend more money on something, then you are more elastic. Going back to the cruise ship example in a previous video, where we saw an increase in price and we said that was relatively elastic because it's so expensive, we have a bigger change in quantity. Well, it's because it's more expensive, you're more sensitive. Also with this too, if you're going to buy a house and the price of a house increases by like 5%, that's a big change. That's a lot of money in terms of a price increase. So we're going to see a bigger change in the quantity demanded for houses because of that. So more of your budget, more elastic. And then finally, we have more time. If I gave you more time to research something, or research if you want to buy this, if there is a substitute, how much of your budget is going to be, right? You're going to be more elastic. So more time, you have more time to be sensitive to this product. So therefore you are more elastic here. Okay. So let's think about some examples that are elastic. Pizza, bread, books, pencils, right? All of these have substitutes. They have a lot of substitutes. Not really much on the percent of the budget, but you do have a lot of time to decide on these goods. So these are going to be relatively elastic. Luxury goods like Caribbean cruises, sports vehicles, okay, those are more elastic because you're spending more money, so you're sensitive to price changes. The main thing I want you to remember about is something elastic or inelastic. It's more time, more substitutes, and more of your budget. These three things right here lead you to be more elastic. Okay. Next, we'll talk about how elasticity affects your total revenue as a business. All right.